First, Ms. Ustinova is absolutely correct. We need to do more to make sure that Putin fails, that this is the biggest strategic mistake he's ever made. But we also have to be clear-eyed about what a no-fly zone would mean. That would mean shooting down Russian planes with NATO jet fighters, and that would escalate this conflict unimaginably.
It's not that simple,
partly because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. We are doing everything we can along the other lines of effort that Ms. Ustinova was calling for, sanctioning and seizing the assets of oligarchs, sanctioning the financial system of Russia in a way that I think we're going to see a financial collapse in Russia imminently, providing urgently needed arms, ammunition, and resupply. Strikingly, some of the EU countries that are former Soviet bloc countries are actually sending MiG jet fighters into Ukraine. But for us to directly confront Russian jet fighters and troops in combat would be a decision to escalate this war beyond anything we've done in decades, and would be a critical strategic decision for the United States. President Biden has pulled together the West in a remarkable show of force. As you just said, Mika, even the Swiss and the Swedes, who were neutral in the Second World War, are taking sides in this fight by closing their airspace, by imposing sports sanctions, by imposing export controls. I think there's more we can do, but the swiftness and the severity of the sanctions already imposed, I think, has surprised Putin and will impose real costs on Russia. Well, Willie, President Biden is perfectly clear-eyed about just how aggressive Putin is and how brutal Russian military tactics are. You can go back and look at what they did in Ukraine in 1932-33 when they starved millions of Ukrainians to death. You can look at what they did in Chechnya in their own country when they assaulted Grozny and leveled it. Or you can look at what they've been doing in Syria in recent years, where they've used cluster bombs and gas as weapons against civilians. This will get ugly. That's why President Biden invested so much time in the last year in healing the rifts in our NATO alliance, in strengthening the West. And that's why he proactively shared critical intelligence for the last few weeks, alarming the whole world, making it clear by sounding the alarm that there really is a wolf at the door in Europe. I do think this will be exceptionally difficult. The Ukrainian people have shown real courage. President Zelensky, I think, is inspiring the entire world. And we're going to see sharp, strong, forceful action to make this hurt for Putin and Putin's close circle of supporters, the oligarchs who keep him in power. Well, first, we are sending in arms. They are getting into Ukraine. President Biden just released another $350 million in lethal weapon assistance to allow Ukrainian fighters to keep fighting. We're going to send literally billions of dollars of food assistance, medical assistance, and support for the refugees who I suspect will pour out of Ukraine into Poland, into Romania, into other countries in the region. And along with a lot of our allies, we're providing critical support both in terms of electronic countermeasures, countering Russian disinformation, providing the ability for Ukrainian fighters to continue to communicate with each other. And although it may not seem as critical as a Stinger missile or a Javelin anti-tank missile, frankly, also providing them with body armor, with fuel, with ammunition is critical to their being able to keep fighting. So let me ask the former president. He's already started using cluster bombs. I believe Putin is deeply frustrated that his troops, mostly conscripts, many of those Russian soldiers who've been captured have said, we didn't know we were being ordered to invade Ukraine. They are not performing as well as Putin had expected. This is taking longer, and the Ukrainians are fighting more effectively and more bravely than he had expected. So I frankly anticipate Putin getting more brutal. And we've seen in other places and in other campaigns exactly what that can mean. That can mean massive civilian casualties for which he should be prosecuted as a war criminal at The Hague. And thank you for the question, Jonathan. I'm looking forward to President Biden's State of the Union address tonight, where I think he will help average Americans understand the costs and the consequences of fighting for freedom and fighting for our values. We're going to put on the table, I believe, additional, tougher, strong sanctions. But our sanctions will be most effective if they continue to be done in coordination with our European allies. Sanctions on the energy sector, yes, would hurt Putin and hurt Russia, but they would also hurt Western Europe significantly. So we need to come up with a coordinated plan for how we can provide alternative sources of energy for our partners and allies in Europe, for how we could absorb those price shocks. And don't underestimate the impact short-term and long-term of the technology controls, the export controls that our Department of Commerce has managed to work out in partnership with countries like Japan and South Korea that will prevent Russia from getting those semiconductor chips that are essential for everything from automobiles to jet fighters. And what a huge impact these banking sanctions are already having on the Russian economy. So there are additional sanctions we can and should consider, but the average American also has to be clear, it will have costs. That's right. In the end, the Ukrainian people will succeed and will be free. We've seen incredible determination by Ukrainians of all ages and backgrounds. Obviously, President Zelensky has been an inspiring figure in these recent days, but there's going to be some very hard days ahead. And frankly, the good news is that the Ukrainian people understand what it means to stand up and fight. They know what they're fighting for, and they know where and why they're fighting. Russians are sending conscripted troops in who are underprepared, under-equipped, under-resourced, and they are facing Ukrainians who fight well at night, who fight well in small groups, and who will fight fiercely for the freedom of their country. The rest of us need to back them up and support them every way we can. And I think in tonight's State of the Union address, you'll also see an inspiring call from President Biden for the world to rally around the cause of Ukraine.